All right, so a little history. Keisha's not here yet. I mean, she'll roll in a little later. But I met Keisha online about 5 years ago, and as I recall, it was a moment in time when the Messianic movement was going through a fight about the partition wall. You may remember some of that. And I chimed into something she had on her blog. Something to the effect that if the people who think they're Joseph would just fulfill their calling, everyone would be happy. Too bad they don't understand the 7 days of creation. I had no idea who Keisha was. It wasn't long until she responded to that, and she said, "You sound like you're singing from my songbook or whatever." And she introduced me to Lisa's work and her work, and so here's my part of the story. Going back into the early 90s, I began looking at the 7-year cycle based on Deuteronomy 15 to try to understand how to stabilize a business environment where I had employees, and I was trying to understand how can I be on God's timing. One day I heard somebody read Deuteronomy 15, 1-6, at the end of every 7 years, you shall cancel your debt, and I went crazy. When is the end of the 7th year? I knew when I knew what the end of the when the end of the 7th year was, and that began a long time search. Eventually, I wrote a book about it. A lot of what I was able to pull together came from sources that I had studied, but then right as I was putting the book together, Keisha and Halisa and the people that are involved with the creation gospel suddenly added this great input to it. So I stand on their shoulders in a lot of ways, etc. But what happened today was that Halisa taught using this menorah, and what I want to talk to you about is the fact that we're finishing up a year 4, according to the spiritual cycle, converting to the spiritual cycle that the Jewish people are following even. So we're finishing up this year, all right, and depending which side you want to look at, we're starting a 5, all right? So 7 days, 7 years, 7 festivals, 7 distinct patterns. And as Halisa pointed out, the whole menorah comes out of 4. The block of gold is in the middle, and everything comes out of 4. As strange as it is, 4 is the beginning of all things. That's really kind of hard to get your head around, but since we are coming out of year 4, it's important to be thinking about. So, the 4th festival is Shavuot. The 4th day of creation is the giving of the sun, moon, and stars, which point us to the Moedim, the seasons. There's 2 other 4s in Genesis. In my opinion, Jacob working 7 years for Rachel is a 4. And 50 years later, Joseph's 7 lean years in Egypt are a 4. Each of you, and I'll get into more of that later, but each of you planned this trip for 4, the beginning of all things. I want to thank all of you, Elise, Alan, Robin, Barbara, all of you who came at Passover this year on this 4th of Passover. It was an important moment. I didn't feel I could get here, but I'll explain later why that's so important to what's going on and what happened. Today I want to hit on a number of study ideas that developed for me over the last 12 months. If you wish to talk about them in detail, we have all week. I can stay here as late tonight as you like, but I'm just going to go through a number of little items that have come into my thinking in this year 4. The Reformation was 500 years ago. 10, 50-year jubilees from right about now. Luther and all that happened in that Reformation followed the printing press by about 60 years. In my opinion, the modern internet is doing to society almost exactly what the printing press did to society. It's created an opportunity for everyone to give their opinion. How's that working out? What it's done is it's taken away the power of the voice from those who had that control, and they're not happy about it, and they're fighting back. And it might get bloody. And it's hard to know what truth is today. We got better communication we've ever had, but is Luther's pamphlet right, or is the church's pamphlet right? Who's right on all this stuff? Well, it's going to take time to sort out, but something has begun. I want you to think about it. Of course, the internet started maybe 1990, 2000, whatever date you want to put to that. We're a long way from being through this thing, if the pattern holds that I'm talking about from the Reformation. Next point, the church, quote unquote, the church, whatever you think of when I say that word, is in disarray, and I don't think there's an exception. It's in disarray. To those that you've had run-ins with, they already have been or they will be discredited. The fish that the Father sent us to find are in that church, or they used to be. So let's talk about what the church calls the Great Commission. Isaiah 2. And the Torah will go forth from Jerusalem. Isn't that exactly what's going on in Matthew 28? The king of Israel is sending his disciples from where? Jerusalem. Where is he sending them? To the world. What's he sending them with? The Torah. Right? Tell that to your evangelical friends. I'm telling you, every evangelical church has that up there on the board. Go ye into the world and preach the nation of the gospel. Now, Barbara, I don't know how that works with the Mormons. You'll have to help me with that. But,
well, they're a missionary church.
That same thing then, right?
Yeah.
2 points about talking to evangelicals. When I speak with them, and I do on a regular basis, I say this. I do not need you to agree with me. I just want you to know that there's someone out here who thinks like this. Let me say that again. I don't need you to agree with me. I just want you to know that there's someone out here who thinks like this. So why do I say that? I say it that way because I know that for a lot of them, they've never had the experience of being told these things. They've never had a chance to have this idea put in front of them. But if you get their defenses all up in a hackle, they're probably not going to hear you even if they're sitting there. But if you say to them, just hear me out, just write me off as crazy right away, but hear me out. You know what? They nod and agree to do it. And then down the road, the Spirit of God can do the work. The second one is a line that Audrey borrowed from Barack Obama. Live the change you want to see. Live it. Live it out in front of them. Pray toward Jerusalem. Blow the shofar. Light the candles. All those things. Because of this. The future is with us. It can be no other way. It has to go this way. You know it and I know it. Ultimately, the festivals will be celebrated. Ultimately, this is how it's going to go. Just have the confidence. Just let them know. Last, for year 4, in Luke 22, verse 20, Yeshua holds out that glass of wine, and he says, "This is the new covenant in my blood. As often as you do this in remembrance of me." Everyone in that room knew he was talking about Jeremiah's new covenant. They named that little second third of your Christian Bible, they named it after Jeremiah's new covenant. They called it the New Testament, but it's named after Jeremiah's new covenant. I'm going to give Ross Nichols credit for bringing this to my attention. I believe Yeshua is guaranteeing all of Jeremiah 30 and 31. Why do I say that? Well, first, let's talk about Jeremiah's timeline a little bit. So, Jeremiah lives about in the century after Hezekiah, all right? So, around 840 BC, Jehu's king, and Jehu, in his time, cities start to be knocked off up in the northeastern corner of the nation, up in the tribes up in the northeast that were on the other side of the Jordan. Reuben, half tribe of Manasseh, and Gad. Cities began to be knocked off. That's 840 BC. The full destruction of Samaria doesn't happen for another 120 years, but over that 120 years, you get the sense that there's a constant banging on the door by the enemy, all right? In that 120 years, if you're losing cities, what's happening to the population? Well, some are being captured and taken away. But anyone with means is getting on those boats and heading out into the Mediterranean. Going on, get past 720, you get to Hezekiah around 700, and Hezekiah wins a great victory according to Chronicles, right? Well, maybe not such a great victory when you stop and think about the fact that Sennacherib comes down out of Syria, and he goes all through the land. He goes to Arad. He does whatever he wants in the land. And Solomon's army of over 1 million men apparently is incapable of doing anything about it. And what does Hezekiah end up with? 200 acres. 200 acres is all that's left of the mighty kingdom of Israel by Hezekiah's time. Something in the neighborhood of 150 years, 150 to 200 years after Jehu loses that first city. 200 acres is the core of what God says is we'll have mercy from it, according to Hosea. There'll be mercy over it. Israel will have no mercy, but Judah will have mercy. But it's only 200 acres that survive. It springs from that. So, Jeremiah's time, he's prophesying, he's going to be there to when the whole city of Jerusalem is destroyed, and he's going to give this prophecy. Now, whenever the word of the Lord comes to Jeremiah, he goes to Baruch, and he asks Baruch to write down my prophecy. And Baruch writes, "And the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah." And over through the book of Jeremiah, you'll see this, and the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. So every time Baruch writes, "And the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah," you can pretty much gather that this is the beginning of a new oracle or a new scroll. All right. So Jeremiah 30, we get the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah 32, we get the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. So we know that Jeremiah 30 to 31, which includes the new covenant that Yeshua just guaranteed, that whole scroll is one piece. So in year 4, as we're coming past it, I want each of you to think about this. Yeshua's blood guarantees all of the promises in Jeremiah 30 and 31, which include, obviously, the restoration. I will make a full end of all the nations where I have scattered you, but I will not make a full end of you. But I will by no means leave you unpunished. In the latter days you will understand this. A voice is heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping for her children. Why not Jacob? Why isn't Jacob weeping for his children? Why Rachel? If we get the new covenant, we get Ephraim smiting his thigh just like the prodigal son. Spend time in there. Learn it. Understand it. A woman will surround a man like a shepherd does and bring them back. That's going on all around us. You can see it right here. So that's the standard of year 4. The new covenant will be fulfilled, and it is guaranteed. Hopefully, in your year 4, you set good standards. You set new standards. By deciding to be here in year 4, I think you did wonderful. So what about year 5? The birds and fish are coming. The preparation for year 5 should have begun around Shavuot. Now, why do I say that? Well, remember the manna in the wilderness, how it would melt when the sun got hot? On the 6th day, they gathered double, and then they prepared for the Sabbath. So that means that in the morning, they gathered manna, and when it got hot in the afternoon, they were preparing that manna for the Sabbath. So if we correlate a day to a year, the fall is the evening, and then as we come through the year, we get to Passover in the springtime, and by Shavuot, it's starting to get warm. It's the time when the manna begins to melt, and so the time of preparation for the following year begins at Pentecost, or Shavuot. That's also another year 4 idea, if you will, that came to me. So what to expect in year 5? So I love the symbolism of the fall festival. In our part of the country, as we get to the fall festivals, the combines are in the field picking corn. And I saw wagons of this yellow stuff that, you know, they planted a little seed and got a lot of seeds. And it's so, the Hebraic calendar is so counterintuitive in that, you know, at that moment in time of greatest wealth in the year, the Hebrew calendar says, blow a trumpet and call everyone's attention to prepare for the appointed time of Yom Kippur. In other words, humble yourselves at the wealthiest time of the year. Humble yourself in 5. Make right with your fellow man. Prepare for 6 is coming. Now, remember I told you that I thought that Jacob working 7 years for Rachel was a 4. All right, so if we're going this way. So if Jacob working 7 years for Rachel is here, then Rachel and Leah fighting is here in 5. Just like the birds and the fish. They're snapping each other. And what's the instruction for Feast of Trumpets? Make peace with your fellow man. Okay? So the festivals always tell us what to do, and the counts of the calendar always tell us what's going to happen. All right? So in this new year, as we started, year 5, take good care of your relationships. Treat this year 5 in a lot of ways thinking about the days of awe. A whole year, if you will, of the days of awe. Rabbi Lutz said we should have a new religion. That's a problem. But, you know, there's some reason why he'd say that. Have you thought about the fact that the descendants of the Jewish believers from Acts 1 through Acts 9 are missing? I don't know anyone who says, well, yeah, I'm a descendant of Peter, or any of the other disciples, or any, there's, where are they? Where did they go? All those people that came to faith in Acts 1 through 9 are missing. The elder team of Acts 15 was based in Jerusalem. It's also missing. So I'm not suggesting a new religion, but I would suggest the old one. The old one that says, God made man last on the 6th day, and on the 7th day God rested, and so did man. Did man earn his Sabbath? No. How could he? He did not earn his Sabbath. He doesn't earn his righteousness. He can't earn his righteousness. I suggest that's a good start. In Genesis 15, what is the state of Abraham? What is his state of being when he's guaranteed the land and children? When that light and furnace goes between the pieces, what's his state? What's his situation? What's he doing? Sleeping. Did he earn it? No. No. Plan and work as if it's for a future generation. If it comes in our time, great. But be confident and be comfortable with the fact that you've got your role. Just do your role. Keep on keeping on. Imagine with me 30 years from now. Israel's 100 years old, and she's growing more faithful. I want to remind you, this nation was founded by socialists, communists, mostly atheists. Today you walk the streets and what do you see? Religiously observant people. I can't explain it, but that's what's going on in this culture. The politics, everything about it is going that direction compared to where it started. So imagine 30 years from now, it's going further down that road. It continues the path it's going on at some level. Now consider also 30 years from now, the rest of the world, especially America, for most of us are Americans, but the rest of the world, especially the Western world, continues its path, which is nothing but a glide path to a dark place. And now I want you to think about with me for a moment a revival, where a young generation opens the written word and they find Ephesians 2. For by grace you've been saved through faith, that not of yourself, but it's a gift of God, not a work lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works. And then it goes on to say, you are no longer, or you were once strangers and aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, without hope and without God in the world. And then 7 verses later it says, but now you are fellow citizens with the saints. Do you think those young people are going to accept something that gets said in some seminary about how to make that not really mean what it says? I don't think so. I think they're going to stand up and say, if I'm supposed to be part of that, I'm going to be part of it. It's working. And the word says, I should be part of this. I want to end by echoing something Halisa said. When we walk in that parade, and as we live in year 5 and years to come, always remember that we are the prodigal coming home. Any problem that we have with the older brother, is God's problem, the Father's problem. Not your problem. Let it go. Not your problem. Not your fight. You're the prodigal coming home. Know your place. Just don't. Just let it go. Work with each other. Correct each other. But not your older brother. He's not your problem. The Father will deal with him. And if he treats you badly, same thing. It's not your problem. It's his problem. Take it. Deal with it. Our walking in the parade on Thursday means this. We reject Jeroboam's golden calves at Dan and Bethel. We reject the priests he appointed. They are not loving. We reject the declaration to change the Fall Harvest Festival to the 8th month. And we return to the city of David, declaring a son of David as the Melech Olam, the King Eternal.